Hi, my name is Jessica, and welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be discussing Tony Gaston's Singles House, The Man Cave, which is our official episode 4. And I don't anticipate to talk much about this episode because just watching it from a male perspective, one, I'm not a man. So I'm going to share some thoughts and things that resonated with me. But as I was watching, I felt like I may not have that much to discuss only because I can't speak from what it's like being a man, the male perspective growing up as an adult. So we'll see where this goes. But there were so many good things that I took away that I thought it was definitely worth having a conversation. So let's get started. All right, so kicking us off, MJ talked about, growing up in a healthy two-parent household and have a father in the home. And later, Caleb shared that he was able to experience that. And just me being a woman who was raised in a single-parent household when my parents divorced, I know that the effects that it had on me. So I definitely can see how it can have an effect on a man and how they are raised, and also playing a part in them being a provider and a leader in the household, or what that looks like for a relationship, and also how it can influence the way they see relationships, whether their mom was single the entire time when they were growing up, or if they actually had a positive male figure in their life. So I love that they had the opportunity to talk about like what it means to have a two-parent household and the effects that it has when you don't, but then how as a young boy they may have been looking for that from someone else, whether that's in the neighborhood or a mentor or someone else that they saw as a male figure, not always a positive figure, but they're yearning for that as a young boy, and it could result in multiple things depending on the outcome and the relationship they have. So I love that they talked about that from the aspect of not having that, and then Caleb being able to provide what he did see and the decisions that his dad made based on the way he was raised in his household, which I think a lot of us can relate when we think about wealth, generational wealth and legacy. And it's not always about money, but it is making the decision that based on how you're raised, and if you know your family history and the way that your parents were raised, your grandparents, and so on and so on, like, do you have an opportunity to change some of those things and create a legacy that breaks whatever has happened in the past, and you make a decision to do something different. So I love that they talked about that. Like, me, that's something that's important to me, so love that conversation. So, at very early on in the conversation about the 1 minute and 37 mark, that kind of led on to a few minutes of discussion, but they talked about like men tying their success and their worth to their finances. And I think that, dating, and I've dated men that were my age and mostly older. And when I say older, the age range could be anywhere from a couple years older as old as 15 years older. So I have experience dating older men, and I will say like them being in a more financial position was always like great, but then also there's still other things that come with that. But to the point of the conversation, thinking about tying their worth to their finances and wanting to be a provider and protector, and I can see that, as a woman who's single and want to be married, I absolutely want somebody with that leader mentality, who wants to provide, who wants to protect. And just my own experiences, finances is a part of my trauma, and it's very important to me. So when I have that conversation with a potential partner, it's not me looking to say like I'm demanding you pay all my bills, or take on all of the responsibilities of what I owe, mortgage and utility bills and things like that. But it's that security that is very important to me. And I know that a lot of other women want that same security. Even if you're going into the relationship with the partner mindset, like you want to know that your partner is financially secure. so that they can lead the household and they know how to manage it. And later on, Caleb talked about that, like men really focusing on themselves. And I once saw this in Instagram post, and it was just I think it may have been Black Love Marriage, the Black marriage movement. But one of the questions that came up was really about men, if you could tell your younger self something, what would it be? And a lot of the guys just talked about the emphasis of they wish that they would have focused more on themselves and got themselves together financially and identified their purpose and their career and built themselves up versus dating. And that was like most of the advice that was given. And then some of the younger guys that were in their 20s were, like, wow, this is good advice. It's receptive. Hadn't heard anybody said it that way, but I'm a person that sometimes I like to read the comments just to get a different perspective. And it was interesting to see that. So for them to bring up, like, I wish that guys would focus on themselves. I think that also comes a part of like the community and what we're communicating and having those strong, positive male leaders and mentors and father figures that can tell men, for men and women, but we're talking about the men. But I'm sure it's important for guys to hear that from someone who may have made mistakes or were successful when it came to really focusing on themselves in their 20s and then their 30s, if they decide to get married or if they get married in their 20s, they've taken that time to be able to give to themselves. And MJ said something that was pretty powerful. Can't remember exactly how he worded it, but I know he talked about being a provider and a protector. But as a guy, it's important to be able to do that for yourself, so that when you meet your wife and when you have a family, you already know how to do those things. And I think it's the conversations like this, which I appreciate the vulnerability in this conversation, but I really think it's the conversations like this that is so important for men to have. And these guys were vulnerable. This was very early into us being in the house. I just want to say that. But to come in and be vulnerable about their experiences and what their thoughts and opinions are, like, that's huge, because I think a lot of guys will say they don't feel comfortable in those spaces. But what they shared, they were open enough to say this. And I truly think the more conversations they have as Black men, especially Black men, in our community, like, we can really, really help our younger generation be successful and know how to focus. So love that they talked about, not only like getting yourself together and holding one another accountable when it comes to that, but the importance of, if you've never experienced, leading yourself, being a provider, protecting yourself, like leading the way for yourself, then how can you lead a family? So love that comment. And I think about, me wanting to meet someone, that's going to be something I observe. Like, how does this person live their lifestyle? How are they leading their future and walking in their purpose? So love that was brought up. So another topic that kind of came up was really thinking, okay, so another thing that I love was said is, and Lex said this about the beginning of that video, but what are you doing when no one is watching? And that's something I live my day-to-day life, by when I'm at work, I always tell people, like, I want you to treat everyone in this building when we're reporting to an office with the same respect, whether that's somebody in the cafeteria staff, that's me, that's your peers, or it's somebody that's coming to pick up the trash. Like, we got to have respect. And I love that Lex brought up, like, what are you doing when no one is watching, and your character, and it really speaking to who you are versus putting on this front that you're someone else. And he also mentioned, like, this fairy tale man. And this has come up so much that I don't think we realized it as a kid. When you really think about, the Disney movies and the romance movies and everything that we watched that kind of shaped what we think a guy should be. Because some of us weren't raised in a two-parent household, and Lex talked about that, seeking that masculine energy from another guy. But even as women, when we think about some of the things that we watched that kind of shape like what we consider to be the perfect husband or the perfect guy, it probably does play a part in a lot of the things that we watched. But there are also women and men who've experienced healthy households, who saw what their father did, and they know what a healthy relationship looks like, and they yearn that too. So I think it comes from a balance of what you saw on TV, then what you may have been exposed to in the household, which that was positive or negative. But I love that he talked about, what are you doing when no one is watching? Like, who are you? And are you changing who you are when you get into the relationship? Because you can only put that on, that act on for so long, right? And then eventually the cape will fall off and you reveal who you really are. But like, really, as a guy, them thinking like who they are and when no one is watching, and then living up to that. And I think that is so important in relationships, because a lot of times, we want the person to perceive us a certain way, to think that like we're the one. But it is so important to like the person that you are dating. I was in a relationship once where I started to question if I really actually like the person. And what I mean by that is like their personality, the way that, they would make slick remarks. Like if that's something that I could absolutely deal with for the rest of my life. And it was no. Like I personally did not like it. I didn't like the interactions. I didn't like the dysfunction that I felt when we were interacting, or if we're having a disagreement. So I think that is so important, like to not change who you are to get with somebody, and be who you are when no one is watching. Like that's the person you want to show up as your authentic self, so that your partner can get really to know who you are. And then also, are you a good person when no one is watching too? Maybe that's an opportunity for some self-reflection. So love that point. Okay, so another thing that I thought was really, really good was, the accountability that they talked about with father figures and not holding on to that. And I have said this in my other videos, and I stand by it. Therapy is so important. Healing is so important, because there are so many things that we hold on to from a childhood, and we get to make the decision that, is this something that I'm going to allow to be an excuse for me not to be the best version of myself, or a better version of who I am today, or striving to be who I want to be? And having an absent father, as the guy stated, was like, we got to hold ourselves accountable to not let that be the excuse to not be a good man. And also, it was stated about almost at the 15-minute mark of the video about men set the pace. And in the singles house video, I think it was gender roles that I talked about. Like, I want to be with somebody who creates this environment where I can embrace my femininity and respect his masculinity, but it comes from him like creating this environment. And it's definitely a teamwork, right? It's both parties, respecting one another and things like that. But like, what type of environment are you creating where I can feel comfortable, where I can flourish, where I can help you flourish? And I do think the man sets the pace. And based on the way that he is leading or lack of leading, it can also play a huge role in the relationship. So I love that they identify that they set the pace, but then also holding one another accountable for their own actions. Like, am I going to allow being in a fatherless home define who I am and define my actions, or do I take that opportunity to do something differently? So I love when they pointed it out. I also love that they talked about Dr. Miles Monroe. Love him. If you're not familiar with him, he talks a lot about relationships, singles, and your purpose, and you can YouTube him. But he, the legacy that he's left on after his passing, and the impact that it's still having, and it's boiling down to like identifying your purpose. So I love that was mentioned in the video. I love to hear that men are listening to, the guys, I should say, are listening to him as well, because a lot of his videos and messages are still very powerful today. So love that they mentioned that. Then also the conversation about purpose. And it sounds cliche, but I love that Caleb really talked about meditating and being still, and like the things that he's done for clarity. And when it comes to purpose, it doesn't always come easy. Like, it's something that you may not identify right away. So I'm 36, and I feel like over the last 2 years is when I really truly understood like what my purpose was in this life. I know what I'm passionate about. I know what I'm good at, but like, what's my purpose? And it took a lot of fasting and meditating and disconnecting from social media and boundaries to be able to identify what that is. But then I also so I'm in Italy visiting my sister, and we went on this food and wine tour, and another young lady, probably about my age, was talking about like her purpose and her having this great job that pays well. She's traveling across the world, working remotely, and she's like, I don't know if this is my purpose. And I think at some point in life we just kind of like go like this, like it's just like straight line, like this is what we're supposed to do. But then like who's to say it's not supposed to look like this as we discover our purpose? So I love that he talked about what he does, to really get that clarity and to be disciplined, but then also the importance of a man knowing his purpose, because if he knows what his purpose is and what he's working towards and what he's building, and I believe this came up in episode 2 about me specifically, like how I want to support the guy that I'm dating, but like if he knows his purpose, then he has an idea of what he's working towards. But if he's still in that phase where he has no idea what he's called to do, no idea where he's going, then it kind of ties back to what the guy said about wishing that, guys in there would focus on themselves really first before, pursuing dating, or even getting married, because there's so much to learn about yourself. And I love that he just talked about that, because meditation does have this can have a negative perception about it, and it can really be so many things, and it truly can help with clarity. So I love that he mentioned that, and that they're taking ownership and accountability of the role that a man places in, not only his life, but his wife's life, his girlfriend's life, his family's life. He really sets the tone and the pace, and we follow, right? When we talk about submission, you really want to be able to have somebody who is truly leading the way. And I love that they took accountability of what that looks like for a guy. So towards the end of the video, Caleb used this farmer's analogy that I really liked about planting seeds and watching them grow. And I think it is so important for men and women to be held responsible for the decisions that we make when we decide to have sex, and if that produces a child. And there are a lot of my friends that I've spoken to and that I have, relationships with, they were raised in single parent households, whether that's male or female. Most of them were raised in a single parent household, which it is mostly the mother who raised them. And I love when Caleb spoke about, really making sure like you're not only planting your seeds, but you're like watching it grow, and that is a part of your legacy that you are responsible for being a part of. And I think that is so true. There's ownership on both sides. I don't just point fingers at men, but I think also like women, we have to be responsible when it comes to that, because it's so important to make sure that we are protecting our womb, and that when you think about legacy, like, giving your child the start of it, giving them a place where they can grow, flourish, and hopefully be brought into a relationship where you all are working towards a 2-parent household, but then also like you have the common goals, you're working towards a purpose, whatever that is for the actual marriage. But I love that analogy that he used about the farmer. So I was all over that. I was like, yes. So love that. And then I love that they talked about, really making conversations like this cool. Like this should be a conversation that is the norm within men, that they can feel comfortable to talk about these different topics. But then also, it was mentioned about like having an absent father doesn't mean that you can't have strong men in your life. And I believe it was Caleb that talked about the mentors, pastors, other positive role models, specifically when it comes to knowing that you have the absent father. And this is one of the things that I mentioned in the singles house, and don't know if it'll be captured or not. But, when I talked about wanting a husband, something that is important is like looking at the men that he has in his life, right? So I know that like he has to have a relationship with God. That is important to me. So absolutely, that being the number one thing. But like, who are the positive men in his life that can influence him, be an inspiration, keep him on the right track and accountable. Like, what does that look like? And it can be a number of things. It can be mentors, it can be leaders within their church, it can be family members, it can be an actual father or other members of their family. But I think it tells a lot when you look at men and the positive role models that they have around them. That is important. So I love that they talked about that, and that's something that I can definitely know and agree with, that I'm looking for when it comes to a partner. Last thing that we'll talk about, and this was at like the 34 mark to basically the end of the video, how they lost their virginity. And it's not the first time I've heard guys talk about like older women who preyed on them, but my goodness, it was the vulnerability and sharing their experiences. I absolutely appreciate. So thank you for being comfortable enough to share that. But I'm sure young girls and boys experience this, and it is not taken as seriously as it should. And to know that there are so many men who, as young boys, were introduced to sex by older women, 15 to 20 years their age, is mind-blowing. And it talks about a lot of the trauma that they could be holding on to, or the experience that make them react to certain relationships, or they don't react, or the way they interact with women that they're dating, the women that they have sex with. So that whole piece blew my mind. Just listening to them talk about it, because in the house, so we were not a part of any of these conversations. The guys went off to be in the man cave and hang out. So the ladies, we had no idea what the conversations were. And it was good to hear all of this just to get a better understanding of them. So I love that. But listening to their first sexual experiences was, even Caleb talked about someone his same age and something that may have happened to her. It was telling, and not necessarily telling of a reflection of them and their personalities and the way we engaged over a weekend, but how important it is to have conversations with our kids in the community, the Black community, being people of color. I don't know if we talk about it enough. It's always that don't do it, but like helping to really understand the long effects. But I was truly blown away just listening to their experiences and how they each felt like they were preyed on, and then how they responded after, like knowing that it didn't feel right, even whichever age it was. So it ranged from like 13 to 14 to 19, but just listening to that. So it definitely makes me look at having conversations with men a little bit differently, especially now moving forward when they talk about, those experiences. And I think it is important to heal and address a lot of things. So that's something that, as I'm praying for a partner, like I'm praying that it's someone who is actively working on their healing, so that we're both working on healing. So when we come together, it's not something that needs to be identified that we need to do, even though triggers come and go. But that part blew me away. But I was so happy that they were open and honest and transparent to have those conversations. Even Vega jumped in, talking about purpose and being a man of God. So overall, great conversation. Like I said, it was things I felt like as a woman I didn't need to touch on, but I just wanted to share what my thoughts were on this conversation. So another great episode. I hope that you enjoyed this. I am currently in Italy and will be here probably for the next 2 episodes. So I'll be delayed on actually providing my review, but I'll try to do my best just to give an update on my thoughts and what I enjoyed, or things that resonated when it comes to those conversations. So anyway, thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed this review. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you would like to watch more when it comes to my singles house review. And thank you for watching.